Hello, this is Kindome, and in this video I am going to walk through how I like to achieve extreme granulization in Tidal. And what that means is trying to get taking a sample and stretching it out over a very long period of time and achieving some sort of like droning ambient sound and really abusing the striate function. So I've got a sample here that I will play for you so you know what we're starting with.
Fluffy cats in my picture. Fluffy cats in my picture.
Yes, so that's what we'll start with. Yeah, okay. So if we just start striating this,
Fluffy cats in my picture. Fluffy.
not much difference there, but if we really start to striate this in large amounts and really break this sample up into many pieces, it starts to change the sound. So I'm just going to let this run and I'm going to keep increasing the striate value.
Picture. Fluffy cats in my 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 picture.
So you can kind of hear how those grains or when you chop this sample up into many pieces, it starts to affect the sound. But what I really want to do is start to slow this down. So at this point, you know, I'm breaking the sample up into many pieces, but it's not really filling up the space very well once we start to slow it down. One thing we can use is striate prime to deal with that, and if you've watched a lot of my previous tutorials, you know that this is a technique I like to use. Here I am chopping this sample up into 4,096 pieces, and each piece is 1/4096th of the original size. That's kind of hard to say. So this should result in the exact same sound, a very grainy sound. But what we can do is actually decrease the grain size. And you don't have to use powers of 2. That's just what I'm doing. We can use any size. But if I double the grain size, it'll start to fill in some of those gaps, and the grains will start to overlap a bit. Sounds a little different. We'll double it again. And we'll double it again. So now those gaps are non-existent and the grains significantly overlap, and we can slow it down even further without gaps between the pieces. So that's the first way to really kind of stretch a sample out, is to striate it into many pieces, make the grain size a good value for whatever you're trying to do, and then you can stretch it out quite a bit more. All right, so that's technique number 1, and I've got one other little way to deal with making a sample kind of stretch a bit. So if we start here, another thing you can do is actually multiply the sample, or the number of times it's played. What this will actually do is, if we multiply the sample by 2, it'll actually play each grain twice before moving on to the next grain. And if we multiply it by 3, it'll play each grain 3 times in a row. So that sounds like this.
Cats in my picture. Fluffy cats in my picture. Fluffy cats.
So that's another way you can kind of fill in those gaps by just multiplying the sample by some value, and your mileage may vary with, again, with the values that you use. It kind of just has a different sound quality to it, and it may work well for you. One little quirk with this technique is the larger this value you multiply by, you start to hear like a high overtone in the sound, which may or may not be desirable for you. So, yeah, so those are really the two main techniques for really stretching something at length. But the next thing I want to kind of talk about is to kind of fatten this sound up a bit, to kind of, again, create more of kind of a textural ambient type of sound. So let me get this to kind of a different state here. Let's just try this. All right, so let's start with that. Actually, let's make this even longer. So if you've watched any of my Tidal videos, you know that I'm a fan of delay, and this is kind of a cheap way of really fattening up your sound. So if we just do this, it'll add a little bit of it just kind of smooths things out a little bit, and you can try different values. Again, that's kind of a cheap, easy mic way of doing things. But the other thing that's kind of fun is actually juxtaposing it with a different playback speed. So if we do this, if we actually juxtapose the sound in right and left channels, where one channel has the original playback speed and then the other channel is increased by 10%, we get something like this. So you really start to notice a lot of the stereo separation there. Another thing we can do with speed, which I think is really fun, and actually we're going to put some parens around striate and sound here. I do that because I want to apply a speed change to each individual grain. Without the parens, it would just apply a speed change to the original triggering of a single sound. But so if we do this, we can actually scale. I'm just going to make this up here. If we do something like this, if we actually scale the playback speed of each individual grain between 0.2 and 1 with the sine wave, just kind of putting in some random value here to kind of make the sine wave a little irregular with the tempo. I guess since we don't have any reference for the tempo, it doesn't really matter, but so we'll just do this. But anyway, if we scale the speed, it starts to sound like this. Double the speed. So you almost get kind of a phasing or a flange type of effect with that. And then we can further, if we can actually juxtapose a scaled speed as well. And actually, we're going to want to put this before the slow. So if we do this, scale 0. We'll just change the value. We'll just, yeah, something like this. Keep the same speed. You can do whatever you want. I'm just trying. I want the speeds to actually match up so that the right and left channels kind of move in the same amounts. I should say move at the same rate, but in slightly different amounts. So it'll still result in some stereo separation. And maybe we add a 0.1 there. Anyway, yeah, well, whatever. So we'll just do that, and it sounds like this. Kind of interesting, and really that's the core of it. So from there we can really striate at some extreme amounts, really slow this down, and really just have kind of a nondescript, droning, ambient type of sound, which could sound like this. And of course, you could put a lot of variation in this too. We could actually spread the striate function just to kind of give the pattern a little bit of variation. The slower you make things, the slower these changes are going to be noticeable. But in any case, it adds a little bit of variation and kind of spices it up a little bit. Oh. Where's the bug? What did I do? What did I do? Dang it. I'm not seeing it. Yeah. So there you go. Just a few ideas for how you can take a benign sample and really stretch it and turn it into something else. Actually, if we take a different sample, like a sample that's really short, like this short ARPy sample, sounds like this. So really you can do this with anything. Now short samples in like synth or more tone-based samples I don't think work as well, my opinion. I like to work with like the vocal stuff. I think it sounds more interesting, but if we try something like this, let's just see what this sounds like. That's kind of interesting. We've actually taken this really short sample and kind of turned it into more of a longer pad or more of a legato kind of sound. It's pretty rough around the edges. You could play with some of these parameters to try and get some of those clicks out. But in any case, these are some of the tools you have at your disposal to really stretch samples in Tidal. So that's all. Hope you enjoyed, and happy stretching.